Welcome to this latest edition of the Real Deal podcast. I'm your host, Ril Gerald Quinn, recording this on a snowy, depending on where you're at, of course, but on a snowy Tuesday, 11th of February, as we discuss the world of sports and pop culture. Episode 993, Countdown to 1,000 continues. We will have the 1,000th episode April 1st. It's not a joke, by the way. April 1st will be the 1,000th episode of the Real Deal podcast. So we're looking forward to that. Or it's gonna be that week, either April 1st or the week of. I'm leaning towards April 1st. So as of right now, if it changes, I will let you know that. Like, subscribe, or share this podcast. All of your support is greatly, greatly appreciated. Thank you for being with me. Some of you have been with me since the beginning. I appreciate that as we continue to do the best possible podcast that we absolutely can. We begin with a deep dive in Eagle masterpiece. The Philadelphia Eagles win their second Vince Lombardi trophy, their second trophy in 7 years, or in 8 years. First, of course, since the 2017 season, with just a dismantling of the former two-time defending champion Kansas City Chiefs, 40-22. The game really wasn't even that close, to be honest with you. Chiefs got a couple garbage touchdowns when the game at one point was 34-0, 27-0. Of course, they were down at halftime, 24-0. I'm gonna get to the Chief part of this, but let's deal with the champions first. The Eagles were obviously the Eagles were the best team in football. I don't think there's any question about it. I don't want to hear how talented Baltimore was, or what if Detroit would have been healthy. Top to bottom, this was the best team in football, and you are the best team in football when your best player is held in check. In Saquon Barkley, the 25 carries for only 57 yards, and you can still go out there and destroy a team that was going for a three-peat. They are a complete team. They dominated this game basically from start to finish. They really, I think that, when I look at this team, I think how they were constructed at the line of scrimmage, dominant opposite line, dominant defensive line, the drafting, making the right trades. And it's really remarkable considering where they were at a year ago around this time. If you remember, of course, it seems like it was 10 years ago. They end the season losing like 6 of their last 7 games. They get embarrassed. They finish the season 11-6. They get embarrassed by Tampa Bay in the playoffs. And, Sirianni's job was on the line. People were coming at Howard Roseman. It was a real, there was rumblings in the locker room about a toxic culture. Like this thing, for this thing to turn this quickly, in 1 year is remarkable. To be honest with you, but they absolutely were the best team, and I think I look at their culture. I look at their how they've developed this team through the draft, made the right trades, and more importantly, it's they're accountable. They get rid of both coordinators last year. They basically, in essence, tell Sirianni. I'm sure there were some whispers like, "Hey, if you don't get the shit together, you're out too." Like we're not going no. Like we have a talented roster. We have a quarterback that's been to the Super Bowl. We have top receivers. We have all pros at almost on every unit. We can find a coach. Like we can find a coach that can take us over the top. So that culture, that level of accountability really stood out during this particular run. And they're 2-2 after the week 4. They go into the week 5 bye. And from then on, they never looked back and were, without question, the best team in football, and just took off. And really, only had after that. I mean, they lose the Washington game. Uh, they lose the Washington game, which Jaden Daniels was spectacular, but also Jalen Hurts gets hurt in that. And other than that, it was basically smooth sailing for them, and they dominated. They win these last two games. They put 95 points on the Commanders and on Kansas City. And Kansas City was put 33 points on Kansas City offensively. That was Kansas City's a top 10 defense and one of the better has been one of the best scoring defenses, especially in particular in the last 2 years. So Eagles deserve all the credit in the world. They are the standard in regards to the NFC, and that's not even a question. By far, they're the standard in the NFC. I still think Kansas City is the standard in the NFL when I look at the total body of work and what they've done since the 2018 season. I mean, they were going for a three-peat, still over the last 25 games are like 23-2. But the Eagles are clearly the standard in the NFC. San Francisco's has taken a fall. I don't know what they're going to be like next year. Detroit, of course, I would have liked to see a healthy Detroit team because I'm, listen, I'm a fan of the Commanders, but a healthy Detroit team, Detroit would beat the Commanders, would beat the Commanders if Detroit had all their players defensively. Let's be honest about that. Um, the Rams are very good, but they still need some pieces. Green Bay talented but needs pieces. Minnesota I think is a 1 year. I think Minnesota comes back to the pack next year. So, this team, Philadelphia is the standard in the AFC, and they have been since 2000. If we being perfectly honest with you, with the 8 Super Bowl, with the 8 championship game appearances, and now they join a list of teams since the turn of the century that have won multiple Super Bowls. The Giants, of course Kansas City, of course New England, Pittsburgh. So it's a very select list of only a handful of teams that would have won more than one Super Bowl since the turn of the century, since the start of the century. Again, this was a bad game. It was a bad game to watch, unless you were an Eagles fan. The Kansas City had 23 yards of offense in the first half. They didn't cross midfield until the third quarter. You have a situation where, and I'll get to Mahomes, but they made Mahomes look average. They made him look mediocre, but this was a similar performance to the Tampa Bay Super Bowl, in terms of having Mahomes just where Kansas City couldn't block Philadelphia. Kansas City, this wasn't as bad. I would say I still think the Tampa Bay's defense was even more dominant than Philadelphia's defense. I mean, Tampa Bay, he was running despite I know he was sacked 6 times in this game, but in that Tampa Bay game, he saved about 8 or 9 sacks at least with his sheer athleticism. Man, at that point, that's 4 years ago. He was way more athletic in terms of how well he moved, in terms of his ability to scramble than he is now. So he is no telling how many sacks that he saved. He was pressured like 22 times over 20 times in that game. Those tackles, they had no chance against Tampa Bay's defense in that particular Super Bowl. And this is probably the most dominant defensive performance since that particular Super Bowl. And the way the Eagles are constructed, this team's not going nowhere. Jalen Hurts is still a young player. They have a bunch of young talent on just all around. We know how hard it is to stay on top in the NFL from year to year. We understand that, but they are clear again. They own that division. Like like that division belongs to them right now. And again, the Commanders are coming. Dallas is ways away, and of course the Giants are the Giants. But that is they the division's theirs, the NFC is theirs right now. And again, if you're building a team, you're in, especially if you're in NFC, you got to go line of scrimmage. You have to go pass rusher, protecting the quarterback, even to even compete with the Eagles. Like you can't, don't get caught up in these fancy toys in terms of the skill position players. Of course, you have to have a quarterback, but you have to be dominant or strong at the point of attack. You absolutely like that's how I'm constructing my team. That's how you should construct your team anyway. But especially going against Philadelphia because they are as physical of a team as there is in the NFL, and they will absolutely push you around, maul you if you're not strong up front on both sides. You gotta be able to protect against them, and you have to be able to protect your quarterback against them, and you have to be able to, you got to have athleticism on your defensive end to deal with the likes of Jalen Hurts and now Saquon Barkley. So congratulations to the Eagles. They obviously are the favorites going into 2025 season, deservedly so, not only in the NFC but in the NFL um, in general. So they get championship number 2, and they are absolutely the model franchise in the NFC, if not the NFL. Getting to the Kansas City piece of this, listen, there's a reason why no team has ever won 3 straight Super Bowls. It is, I think, to me, if they would have pulled this off, this is one of the great sports accomplishments ever in today's age. The way these rosters are turned over, the way injuries, especially being, you're always in football, you are one injury away to your quarterback or to your opposite tackle away from not being on that level. So the fact that they got to a third straight Super Bowl, um, do not discount that in regards to Kansas City. People want to take their shots at Kansas City. I totally understand it. It was getting. I understand the ideal that you know it was a million Taylor Swift shots and people were getting tired of that. Then you had Caitlin Clark join the mix a couple weeks ago in the booth. It was extra. It was getting a little too much as far as the celebrities and connecting themselves with Kansas City. But as a franchise, especially when it comes to Mahomes, I'll say this: that was probably the worst game. That was the worst playoff game I've seen Mahomes play. Even worse than the Tampa Bay game because some of the he actually did some incredible things in that Tampa Bay game that the box score doesn't even justify. It doesn't even tell the story. Some of that's just athletic or just sheer athleticism in avoiding many of those sacks that could have happened if not for his athleticism in that game. You go watch the highlight film. Just check out the highlight film on that and see some of the stuff he did. And I know it only produced 9 points, but he was doing some crazy stuff in that game. This game, I just thought that he allowed the pressure to get to him in a way that, you know, pressure is pressure. But if you're a veteran quarterback, if you are one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, which he is, and I still think he is, there are some things that you can do, I think, to kind of somewhat negate the pressure. Now, I think the biggest misstep for Kansas City in that game was a lack of a running game. And I don't put that on Mahomes. I put that on Andy Reid. This has always been a problem with Andy Reid. I think Andy Reid is a legit top 5 coach of all time. I love Andy Reid is a all time great coach. I love Andy Reid as a coach. He's one of the great offensive minds of all time, without question. But we all know, especially Philadelphia Eagle fans of over 20 plus years and 30 plus years, Andy Reid never does not like to run the football. Doesn't like to run the football. If Andy Reid could throw the football in every down, he would. He runs out of just convenience or runs just to say, hey, we ran the ball. If you look at Kansas City the last 2 years and you look at them in the Super Bowl and you look at them in some playoff games, they had a nice balance of running and passing. They had a nice balance. It wasn't just all Patrick Mahomes. And against a pass rush that vicious, you have to run the football. And it doesn't matter whether it's 2 yards in a cloud of dust. You have to run it to keep that pass rush somewhat honest and somewhat off balance. Now, again, I you can make the case what Andy Reid was thinking or knowing what he knew and was thinking that we're not constructed to run the ball effectively against this team. They destroyed the running game, and we don't want Mahomes and our shaky pass protection offensive line in 3rd and 9, 2nd and 10, 2nd and 9. I get it from that standpoint. I totally understand that logic. But coming out and throwing the ball as much as they were throwing it, they were asking, just asking for what they got. And by the way, I think you can make you to me, attacking the Eagles, you can make plays on the Eagles through the pass, but you have to balance it with the run. You have to try to attempt to run the ball against the Eagles against that pass rush. You just have to. As frustrating as it may get, as hard as it is, you might only get 1 or 2 yards, but you gotta like that part. You can't leave your quarterback out there hanging out there to dry against that pass rush. They have too many quality high level rushers, and that's what happened in this game. They never even remotely tried to run the ball. Um, and again, I think teams, I watched the Commanders a couple weeks ago, basically start off the game abandoning the run. One of the problems I had with the Commanders play calling in that game, and the Commanders are a running team, is I thought they threw the ball too much. I know Jaden Daniels is capable of handling a workload where he can throw the ball 30 plus times, but that's not how that team, the Commanders, were built. That's not they were a running team. They allowed the Eagles, or the fear of not being able to successfully run the ball, they allowed the Eagles to kind of take them out their own game, and it put them in a compromising spot. Um, so I think that was the one thing that I think if they could have done differently, probably could have ran the ball a little bit more. But again, I'm nitpicking here. They clearly in this game were overmatched. Um, I know Patrick Mahomes is taking a lot of heat. I just want to keep. I just want you to keep this in mind about Patrick Mahomes. And by the way, had he won this game, I'm not calling him to go. This would have just been one thing that he had over Tom Brady as far as a three-peat. He's been to 5 Super Bowls before the age of 30. Let's keep this all in perspective. He's been to 5. He's been no quarterback in history has been to more Super Bowls before the age of 30. 5 is a big number. Okay, he's 3-2. He loses clearly to the best team in football. And in the Tampa Bay game, he lost to the greatest quarterback and greatest football player ever in Tom Brady. Let's just keep that in mind. I understand that they were both ass whoopings. Um, if you want to say the GO conversation is over, okay. It's not, but okay, but let's put it aside for at least 4 to 5 years. That's fine. But Brady lost Super Bowls as well. And Brady lost 3 times in his career. He's 7-3. And two of those games, and two of those games that he did lose, he lost because his offensive line got their asses kicked by a great defensive line with the New York Giants. Similar to Patrick Mahomes, Chiefs getting their asses kicked by dominant defensive lines with Tampa Bay back in 2020 and of course the Eagles this year. So let's just keep that in mind from that standpoint. And you get these comparisons. Well, Tom would have did this. Tom would have did that. We've seen Tom Brady against dominant defensive lines lose. We saw it, like we saw it in the conference championship against Denver. When by the way, when Peyton Manning was cooked. Remember that game? The 18 excuse me, it was the 15th season, the 2015 season. Peyton Manning was cooked as a quarterback. He was cooked. He got benched early in that year, and Denver's defense single-handedly beat the Patriots and ended up winning the Super Bowl that year, beating Carolina. That's because Von Miller was out there just destroying people, and they couldn't handle their pass rush. So, a great pass rush can make any quarterback look average or mediocre. Now, again, I'm not again, I'm not defending Patrick Mahomes. He had an awful game. He was awful. Those interceptions were bad. They were horrible throws. It was horrible throws. They were horrible reads, and they came at the wrong time. I mean, if they go into the halftime down 17-0, you still have a fighting chance. 17-0 is not insurmountable by any stretch. The pick six to make it 17-0. You're down only 10-0. Those interceptions were that those in essence that were the game. That was the game. Those two turnovers. And Philadelphia turned those turnovers into immediate points. So that was the game. But this idea, well, Tom would have figured it out. I'm like, not against this defense. Tom wouldn't have figured it out. No. Maybe he makes it a little closer, but he's not winning the game. He's not winning the game, not against this defense. This defense is better than the defenses that he lost to. Like, this is a great defense. This defense is much better than the Giants defense in 07 and 2011. Or 2010, excuse me. No, 2000. I was right, 2011. This defense has no weaknesses. They have all pros at they had all pros and pro bowlers at every level, every unit. They have zero weaknesses. They're great in the back end. The linebackers, they have an all pro linebacker. Jalen Carter is a monster. He's going to be all pro someday. He was a Pro Bowler this year. They have multiple pass rushers. They can rotate their pass rushers. They have a strong, above average secondary. There are no weaknesses with this defense. This was a great, great defense. Probably top to bottom, the best defense I've seen since Tampa Bay. Since Tampa Bay in 2020. This is a great defensive team, pure and simple, led by one of the best defensive coordinators in the league, a great defensive coordinator in his own right, in Fangio. So I don't know. Me, this is more about what the Eagles did than what Kansas City did not do. You give the Eagles the credit. Kansas City got their asses kicked. It's just as simple. They got outclassed. You want to say outcoached? Yeah, outcoached, outclassed. But this, I don't lay this at the feet of Patrick Mahomes and Patrick Mahomes only. Now, again, if you want to knock him from the GOAT conversation, that's fine. Okay, so at worst, he's the second greatest quarterback of all time. At worst. Like, what are we talking about here? He's 29. He's going to be 30 years old with 5 Super Bowl appearances and 3 Super Bowl MVPs and 3 Super Bowls and 3 Super Bowl MVPs. So, still to say, like I said, at worst, he's still the second greatest quarterback of all time. And remember, Kansas City is a top organization. When they lost the Super Bowl to Tampa Bay, they came back right the next year, got to a conference championship, lost it on a field goal, and then proceeded to win back-to-back Super Bowls. And they still are clearly the best team in the AFC. I don't give me how much talent Baltimore has. Baltimore, that talent couldn't get them past a divisional game against Buffalo, who was clearly less talent, less talent than they did. So I don't want to hear about Buffalo. I don't want to hear about Baltimore. I don't want to hear about Buffalo. They own Buffalo. So you put those two teams aside, who else are we talking about that's going to beat Kansas City? I haven't seen enough yet. The Chargers don't have enough right now. Houston doesn't have enough right now. We'll see what the Patriots do. I mean, Patriots will be interesting as far as because they have a real coach. And I love the quarterback. I think the quarterback has a chance to be great, but they are a number of pieces. They need bodies. So the AFC goes through Kansas City. So at worst, they will be right back in the conference championship next year. They will start the season off on third base in essence. And again, they will fix the offensive line. They will be and I hope this isn't the case because I want Myles Garrett, of course, who has demanded a trade from Cleveland and probably will be traded. I'd be surprised if he wasn't. And Kansas City is in the mix to get Myles Garrett. They don't pay a lot of players right now. They pay Mahomes. Kelsey could retire, especially if Kelsey retires. They pay Chris Jones, and that's it. They don't pay. They're not paying a lot of money to a lot of players. And remember, Mahomes' contract is not. Let me look at his contract. It is not a. Remember, it was a basically team friendly, in essence, team friendly contract. I have to look it up real quick. So Kansas City is fine. If you think Kansas City is going somewhere, going anywhere, then you're just not paying attention. And remember this: if you get to the championship game that many times, you're going to take some losses. Like Bill Belichick with New England was 6-3, lost three times. The Montreal Canadiens have won 24 Stanley Cups. You know how many they've lost? 10. Okay. New York Yankees have won 27 World Championships. You know how many they've lost? 14. Los Angeles Lakers have won 17 chips. You know how many they've lost? 15. If you get there year in and year out and get there enough times, you're going to lose eventually. And you might take a couple losses. You're not going to sit up here and win a Super Bowl or a championship every year. It's just not going to happen. That's what makes what, Michael Jordan did with the Bulls remarkable, going 6-0. But, I'll leave that one alone for all the LeBron fans out there. But you're not going. You get to if the Lakers in the '80s got to nine finals. Magic Johnson, they lost four. They were 5-4. They lost four times in the finals, but they got to nine. So you just want to be in the conversation. Like you just want to be in the conversation. They are more. They're more than just in the conversation. So Mahomes next year his cap number. Well, it's actually a high cap number. It's actually 66 million. Okay. Well, he's one of like three Chiefs that are getting paid. Is Mahomes, Mahomes, Chris Jones, and Kelsey. And Kelsey could retire. Kelsey has a cap number of like 19, 18 or 19 million. So if Kelsey retires, they certainly will be in the conversation to obtain to get Miles Garrett. The point of all this is they're not going anywhere. That team is not going anywhere. They will be right back in the mix. I mean, you can see it's possible that we see these two teams back in the Super Bowl next year. I do not be surprised. I mean, I know Super Bowl rematches don't happen in back-to-back years very rarely. It hasn't happened um, since Bills Cowboys way back when in 93, 92, and 93 seasons. But it is very much possible that these two teams can and will meet next year in the Super Bowl. And I don't see I don't see the Kansas City Chiefs falling off or coming back to the pack anytime soon. The one thing I think they have to do, the one thing I really noticed in the game outside of what happened with the offensive line getting dominated, their receivers, even when Mahomes rarely had time to throw the ball, their receivers were not creating separation outside of Worthy. And remember, those passes were late in the game. The Eagles might even had some backups in the game. That's how late those two touchdowns came in the fourth quarter when Eagles were already thinking about it was a coronation at that point. They do need to upgrade the receiver position. I'm not saying going out there and get an all pro or that caliber player. They probably they're not going. They traded Tyreek Hill, so they're not going in that direction. But they gotta get somebody that can create some. They gotta get one more guy because they'll get Rashid Rice back. Worthy can take the top off of defense. They need one more guy to create separation. So that I did notice that in this game where the guys just could not get open. And Kelsey, we know Kelsey is shot. He had a great career. He's one of the greatest tight ends of all time, but not the greatest. Definitely the greatest postseason tight end of all time, without question. As he holds just about every receiving record known to man between him and Jerry Rice. But yeah, they definitely need to upgrade that wide receiver position. Again, you don't have to. Again, with you have Mahomes, you have an offensive mind like Andy Reid. You don't have to get the Pro Bowl, All Pro caliber receiver. They don't need to get that player. To get that player, that player is going to player's not going to be out there. I mean, T. Higgins is going to either get franchised or signed for just an insane amount of money. Um, Tyreek Hill is not coming back to Kansas City. He's kind of calmed down as far as those trade. He's kind of his better judgment has taken over as far as calming down after the immediate reaction he had when the season was over. So he'll be back in Miami more than likely. Um, but yeah, this game, getting back to my original point, this game was about the Philadelphia Eagles and about their dominance and them being a complete team and them being a absolute complete franchise. The Super Bowl, the highlight of the entire Super Bowl was clearly, without question, the Super Bowl halftime show with Kendrick Lamar. I thought, and I watched the performance at least probably like 3 times. It gets better each time. I think that this is, and I'm not going to get caught up in comparing this performance to other performances in Super Bowl history. I think that's a mistake, and I think that if you're doing that, then you're completely missing it. This performance, this was a performance that was bigger than the Super Bowl. This was a performance that was more important than the Super Bowl. This was a performance that was more important than entertaining you and me. Okay, there was a clear, distinct message that was being sent by Kendrick Lamar, from a cultural standpoint, from a historic standpoint, from a storytelling standpoint. If you again, you know, it'd be hard to talk to somebody who says that the performance is trash. Like you just don't know quality art, and I don't know if we can even have a conversation if you say it was trash because I don't think you can come up with a legitimate or logical argument that it was trash. If the performance wasn't for you, then um, that's an acceptable reason. Like Kendrick Lamar is not for everybody, but keep this in mind: Kendrick Lamar does not fit the what the average person may think what a Super Bowl performance should look like. He's not doing the over the top. He's not going to do the over the top special effects and grandiose scenery. No, 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 no. It's not. That's not what it's about. It's not what. That's not what he's about right now in this moment. If you're comparing this to his performance in 2016, you're making a big mistake. You're making a huge mistake. Kendrick Lamar in 2025 is not the guy that he was, not the artist that he was in 2010, 2012, 2016, 2022, 2023 for that matter. He's just not the same dude. He's in a different place right now. It's clear that he's in a different place right now. And listen, it's not like he went out there and gave you hits from his 3 most critically acclaimed albums, or 3 of his most critically acclaimed albums, like Pimple Butterfly, or Mr. Morale, or even Good Kid, Mad City. He gave you the slaps. He gave you Humble. He gave you All the Stars. He gave you Not Like Us, Squabble Up. You got the slaps. You got some of his biggest records and some of his most popular records. And again, I'm not saying he was Euphoria. I'm not saying that he was intentional as far as from that standpoint of wanting to appease the audience. I think you're dealing with a different dude here. I don't think he gives a shit about trying to he's not a people pleaser. Yeah, he's gonna put on the show and he'll sell out tour. This GNX tour will be sold out from a stadium to stadium. But this was a moment. He met the moment with this performance. You had a racist white supremacist president in attendance. Okay, this is the most scrutinized, commercialized venue an artist can perform on as far as the Super Bowl halftime. So, if like I said, if you hated it or you didn't like it, I gotta ask. I had to ask why. The question I have to ask is, what were you expecting from him? If you really know how Kendrick Lamar moves right now, the guy he's constantly evolving as an artist, constantly evolving. So you can't have the expectation that he's gonna go out there and be about special effects. If I equate this to movie making, he's about the acting. He's not about the special effects, man. He's not about that. You're not going to a Kendrick. You're not going to this particular performance was specific to the moment, to the message that he was trying to send. Period. Point blank. And again, even with that, it wasn't like he hit you with a bunch of somber uh music from Mr. Morale. He didn't touch any of those songs. It didn't touch any of that music, any of those records. Again, it's a mistake. It's a mistake to compare it to past work. It's a mistake to compare it to past performances. There's no artist like he is his own artist. There's no other forget about hip hop artists. There's no other artist in the world that's like Kendrick Lamar that performs like Kendrick Lamar, that moves like Kendrick Lamar. He's his own. There's one Kendrick Lamar. Period. Point blank. You cannot put him in a box. Can't put him in a box. And again, I thought the performance it was a work of art. I think that as the years go by, that similar to some of his albums that came out, that they will age like novels. Like you will be people in their 20s, 10, 15, 20 years from now will look at this performance completely different as a 40, 45-year old or a 50-year old versus looking at it look versus a 25 or 20 or 30-year old. They will. And I think that again, I don't think I'm so happy that he didn't try to go out there and appease the Super Bowl audience. Like he went out there and it was his authentic and was true to his art. He was completely true to his art, and that's that used to be. I mean, that used to be enough out of an artist, but now again, I listen. I don't want to sound like the old man on the get off my lawn. But when you try to go out there and please everybody, there's always going to be somebody that complains. And I see somebody who doesn't just gives zero fucks. It's not really, if you don't fuck, you fuck with it or you don't. It's just that simple. It's like it's really just that simple. Um, Again, the most I'm not gonna get up here and get caught up in was it the greatest performance or rank it amongst other Super Bowl performances. I think we're just missing the boat by doing that. But it was the most important and the most powerful performance I've seen in all the years I've watched Super Bowl performances. To be perfectly honest with you, who won the week? Philadelphia general manager Howie Roseman just has done a masterful job at constructing this roster. Had one of the great off seasons of all time. Um, you sign a Zach Bond. Bond becomes an All Pro. You get Saquon Barkley, third, finishes third, second run up in MVP, Offensive Player of the Year. The drafts, they're just constantly knocking it out on these drafts with these Georgia recruits, with these Georgia draftees, Kobe Dean, who didn't even play, by the way. That's another scary part of the Eagle defense. That guy is going to be an all pro caliber player. Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, Dejon, just, he now has two Super Bowls with two different quarterbacks and again has completely remade this franchise, rebuilt this franchise. Like I think when they won the first Super Bowl, that kind of still was Andy Reid's. It was a lot of it was some still it was a lot. It had a few, excuse me, a number of key players that were left over from what Andy Reid built with that team and how he established that culture. This was Howie Roseman's complete team. Like this was it. This was his baby, so to speak. So it kind of like I kind of compared to when George Seifert won that second Super Bowl with San Francisco. in '94. Like that was his versus the one he won in '89, which clearly we know, or 19 or nine or 89, which we know that was Bill Walsh's team. So Howie Roseman gets wins the week. The general manager, president of the Philadelphia Eagles again, is obviously the had one of the great off seasons that in NFL history. And I'm not speaking hyperbole when I say that. That if you when this is when we look back at this 10, 15, 20 years from now, we're gonna be like, how did he nail all of those, whether it's the picks, whether it's the free agents, everything. He had all the spades, and hit the jackpot, and it to help produce, of course, another championship for the Philadelphia Eagles. That's going to wrap it up for this latest edition of the Real Deal podcast. Uh, Enjoy the rest of your week. If you're out here in the DMV, obviously be safe. I will see you next time with another edition of the Real Deal podcast. So long.